The view from City Hall in a time of turmoil. The view from Washington from a senator who will enter the record books for the brevity of his term. The Point starts right now. I'm joined now by New Jersey Senator George Helmy, who replaced Bob Menendez in Washington. And Senator, there is so much to talk about. But before we get into everything going on in Washington, I need to ask you about congestion pricing, because the federal government has just approved congestion pricing, and that's the last hurdle. How do you feel about it, and do you think it's going to be bad for New Jersey?
Well, I do, but Marcia, let me first say what a pleasure and an honor it is to be with you. Thank you for having me, and equally as important, thank you for what you do. Yeah, I think frankly it's bad for New Jersey and it's bad for the city. Let me start by saying, having been a chief of staff and a two-time Senate staffer, mass transit in this nation is wholly underfunded, and we need to find ways to continue the investments as our population grows, our cities grow, and we need to get people out of cars and into mass transit. That being said, at a time where I think working families in New York City, the surrounding boroughs, and in New Jersey are facing affordability crunches, I think to double toll them as they come over our bridges and into the central business district, I think is a mistake. Governor Murphy has said for a long time that it's a mistake, and you've seen over the last 2 years more and more New York City-based organizations, including business groups, say that this is bad for business and bad for working families in the city.
I just wonder if it goes through, and there are still some court challenges, if you see some businesses decide to relocate in New Jersey because of the cost to the people who work for them.
Yeah, I think that's right. And look, I think, as you know, the Murphy administration continues to pursue this in court. I'm sure they're going to take it up with the incoming federal administration. But at the same time, I think that is going to be the reality. A lot of the employees who come to the city every day are New Jerseyans, mostly North New Jerseyans, or live in our shore communities. And if they can get their businesses to move into Jersey City or Hoboken, where we're already seeing some of that influx, I think it's going to be good for New Jersey. But as I said, Marcia, I think it's bad for the city.
But also, you know, with remote work, you could have more people opting to work remotely, which will also have a bad effect on the tax base in New York City.
I think that's all right. I think it's bad for the city. For sure, it's bad for the constituents who live on our side of the river, who are coming in here every day. And as you've seen, as I mentioned, you've seen multiple trade organizations say it's bad for their own commerce coming in and out of sections of the central business district.
But, you know, the MTA has a problem because it has a 120-year-old subway system that needs massive amounts of money to fix it. So the question is, where do you get the money?
Yeah, I think that's a question for the MTA, and I think there's historic failures of properly funding that. But I don't think that the answer is double tolling constituents coming in on a business day.
So you replaced Bob Menendez in Washington. You assumed his position on the Foreign Relations Committee. I wonder, you know, how you've looked at the foreign policy of the United States, and especially the crisis in the Middle East.
Yeah, it's been a great focus of my time, and I've been fortunate to work for Senator Frank Lautenberg, who obviously paid a lot of attention to what was going on in the Middle East, specifically with Israel, and Senator Booker, who's also a colleague of mine now and on the Foreign Relations Committee. And when I came in, there was the obvious focus on the armed conflict. And I have taken sort of a very specific lane in saying you can both be supportive of Israel and support the U.S.'s role in giving it the arms it needs to defend itself against terror organizations and the great sponsor of terror, which is Iran. But at the same time, Gaza is an incredibly dense area, and the crisis is you know, we are watching one of the great decimations of human life in Gaza.
Crisis.
Exactly.
And you also made a trip to Jordan to see how Palestinians are living. And what did you learn from that?
Yeah, I had an incredible 3-day trip to Jordan on the official side. Met with government officials, heads of nonprofit organizations, and our own embassy there. And what I saw actually was heartbreaking. I saw warehouses, and Secretary Blinken had just been to one of the warehouses. I saw warehouses full to the brim. They couldn't accept any more stuff that were full to the brim with food, hygiene products, latrines, because people
that are supposed to go to Gaza.
That are supposed to be going to Gaza. They couldn't get into Gaza.
Why?
For a variety of issues. They didn't have a compliance check from the Israeli government that could be used for dual use, or things were getting stuck at the checkpoints. Or when they got to the checkpoints, Marcia, they couldn't get to the distribution areas. You know, some of these are real security challenges. There is obviously an armed conflict going on, but some of these things I think we're just not pushing hard enough, both from the American administration and the Israeli government, in really viewing the crisis the way we should.
What should we be doing?
I think we need to be exerting more pressure on Netanyahu's government and bringing all of our efforts to bear. And this was, one of the messages we were sending through the recent vote on Senator Sanders' resolution is it's just not fathomable that a few miles away from the Israeli checkpoints and a few miles away from where women and children and infants are dying, food, medication, and winterized tents as the winter sets in are not able to get across those checkpoints. And so we need to be bringing pressure to bear to ensure that we are bringing more goods to those who need it.
So what we need to explain to our viewers is that Senator Sanders had a resolution to block the sale of armaments to Israel. And you had a sort of a split vote where you voted to give aid to for tank things and for bomb guidance. But
That's right.
You decided to vote against it in terms of sending mortars to Israel. Why did you do that?
We knew going in that these votes were not going to have the necessary majority to pass.
Right.
And so when you look at what we were voting on, I was making a very nuanced but complicated statement in a complicated issue, and I think the American people understand the nuance and complication of this. I support Israel's right to exist. I strongly support the U.S.'s role in supplying it with the resources, as I said. But at the same time, those resources that we give to any country come with rules that the Senate puts in place, and you have to comply with those rules. So my vote said, you mentioned the tank artillery. Those are 2 years away. So to vote in not giving ammunition and munitions that are 2 years away is not in compliance with my view of us supporting Israel. Second was the JDAMs, which make dumb bombs into smart bombs. If you're dropping bombs of 2,000 pounds into a dense area like Gaza, I'd prefer they be smart than dumb. So that left me with the third vote, and the mortar rounds have been used in some of the major issues where we've seen civilian casualties. But that was the resolution where I felt, okay, I can make that nuanced statement, both being supportive of Israel, but saying we do need to do better. Non-combatants are dying here.
So what was your reaction when the International Court decided to issue a warrant for the arrest of Bibi Netanyahu for war crimes?
Yeah, I agree with the president's position and the position of the National Security Council here. I don't find it helpful. Now, I'm not privileged to all the research and the warrants. Those are confidential. I don't find it helpful, and I find it rushed. I do worry that it leads to the further isolation of Israel in the world at a time where I think the world needs to be working with Israel on bringing the guns silent so that once again we can get in there, work on the peace accord, the two-state solution, and frankly, people are dying today, and we need to get more aid into Gaza today.
But on the same token, you're concerned about the humanitarian crisis in Gaza.
Yeah, well, I think that you can say both things. You can say that we're not doing enough while also saying that it's not a war crime.
So how do you think that the United States policy towards Israel will change under President Trump, and will it really hurt the cause of the Palestinians?
Well, where I always start with hope and optimism, and where I'm optimistic is the president has said before he takes office he wants to see the conflict come to an end. So I'm hoping that the guns will go silent. We'll have all of the hostages, including the Americans, including the New Jersey and Edon Alexander, return safely to their families. And again, that will, once the guns go silent, we can start getting more aid in there, and we can start working towards a two-state solution.
So do you think that there really is the possibility of a two-state solution?
I think there has to be. What other option do we have? What we are doing now in dropping bombs, this concept that we're going to eliminate Hamas and Hezbollah through munitions is false. This is an ideology, and if you are continuing to shell a dense area where there is no economy and people feel no hope, what you're actually doing is breeding more radicalization.
But do you also think, I mean, Trump has been sort of warlike when it came to Iran. Do you think that he's going to go wink, wink, Israel, it's okay for you to bomb Iran, especially to go after their nuclear capabilities?
Well, I hope not. I think where Israel has been incredibly successful is strategically targeting Iran's resources and strategic sites while not causing a significant escalation. And I think, again, where I'm hopeful and listening to the president's words is he will try to bring the guns silent as quickly as possible.
Do you think he's going to be successful?
I hope that he is.
And what about in the Ukraine?
Well, in the Ukraine, I hope that it will continue, and there is very strong, including a resolution that we shut down the other day. There is strong bipartisan support for Ukraine defense in the United States Senate, and I'm hopeful that the president again will work with the Congress to ensure that we are providing a sovereign nation with the resources it needs and defend against Putin's aggression.
Senator, thank you so much. We're going to have to leave it right there for now, but our conversation continues right after the show on our streaming channel, CBS News New York. Justin Brannan is a city council finance chairman who just helped negotiate the City of Yes housing plan. But before we talk about that, I want to talk to you about congestion pricing, because on Friday, the federal government cleared the city's plan, the MTA's plan. It was the final hurdle. So I guess I know there's still going to be protests, but what's your take on whether it's a good idea or a bad idea to do congestion pricing?
Thank you, Marcia. I don't think ever writing the MTA a blank check is a good idea. And I think for neighborhoods like mine and Southeast Queens and the Northern Bronx and Staten Island, where we don't have a lot of transit options and we're so-called transit deserts, we're going to be taxed and punished even though we have no other option of how to get into Manhattan. I also think that congestion pricing, the argument before the pandemic, was an interesting one. I think as we're still trying to entice people to come back and work in Manhattan, I don't know if this is the best time to be implementing congestion pricing. I'd love to see some of these investments made before we get the bill, right? And, I think taxpayers are tired of getting the bill before they eat the meal. But for folks who live in transit deserts who are going to have to start paying this tax on day one, they have no other option for how to get around. And I think it's tough, and there's no other way around it.
I guess the question also becomes, if you don't have congestion pricing, how do you pay for the upgrades that the 120-year-old subway system really needs?
Sure. I mean, absolutely, right? It's, $15 billion in capital improvements that we desperately need. But it's also just from decades and decades of mismanagement of the MTA that now it's come down to, okay, now we have to just tax people to make up the cost. And it's just not ideal. So I'm happy to hear that the governor has brought the price down. But I just worry about folks who have no other choice but to drive because they have no other option, who are going to have to pay this tax.
Do you think there's going to be a political price to pay for the governor having implemented congestion pricing and having to run for re-election in 2 years?
I don't think anybody... I don't think anyone voted for Democrats because she paused congestion pricing before the election. That's just not a thing. So it was puzzling as to why it was paused at the 11th hour. And now sort of trying to reanimate it before Trump gets into the White House because everyone assumes Trump is now going to try to kill it. It just gives taxpayers whiplash, and just no one likes that.
See, there's a part of me that thinks that maybe the Republicans want congestion pricing to go through because they want to use it to run against her when she runs for re-election, on the hope that they could somehow become, take the State House in Albany.
It's possible. Look, Republicans, I think, have one of the easiest jobs in the world, and for now, because they get to point at stuff and say, this is broken, this is bad, and no one expects them to actually fix it. Now they're actually going to have the ball in all branches of government, and let's see if things get better. I don't think they will.
Is there a last gasp for the opponents of congestion pricing to get a stay?
I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, I've read stuff about different judges and stuff taking a look at it, but I'm not sure.
Oh, let's talk about the City of Yes. It's a landmark attempt to build housing in a city that desperately needs it. We have a 1.4 vacancy rate. Yep. We need new housing. Is this going to do all we expect it to do? I
think it's a huge step in the right direction. We haven't seen a zoning change of this type since the 1960s in the city of New York. And I think City of Yes, in the end, on what we're going to vote on next month, is going to be a good plan that's going to allow for about 80,000 new units of housing across all 5 boroughs, across every community. And I think the plan that the council put into effect, the City for All, also includes investments in infrastructure, in affordability, in home ownership. And it also takes, it also respects community context, right? People don't want to see a skyscraper built next to a row house. And I think we have to also get away from some of the misinformation that's been out there, that people think that we're going to, ban 1- and 2-family homes, or the bulldozers are coming for your little house. That's never the plan, right? It was just about building a little bit more housing in each neighborhood, and I think that will accomplish this.
What about the argument over parking? Right now, before it goes into effect, there are requirements that if you're building a building, you have to make allowances for parking spaces. That's going to change. Tell me about the three-tiered system.
So the three tiers are basically, it's all about how far away you are from transit, which makes a lot of sense, right? The closer you are to transit, if I live above the subway station, I don't need a car to get around because the subway's there. Hopefully it's a reliable line. But the idea, though, is also to let the market decide a bit. So if I'm building, with City of Yes, or even right now, if I'm building a new development in an area where there's no transit, if I want to get a return on my investment as a developer, I'm probably going to offer parking whether or not the city says I have to or not, because I want to rent or sell those units. So for me, it makes a lot of sense. If you're in a neighborhood where it's a transit desert and people have to drive to work and you're a developer, even if the city says you don't have to offer parking, you still might do it. So I think one thing that people have to understand with the City of Yes, this isn't mandating anything. We're not saying you have to go build housing.
But it is changing the zoning.
Absolutely, which is great because it's been way too onerous for way too long. But I think the market will still decide in a lot of these cases, which is what we want.
But also there's another question about whether you can build on one family units, whether you can build an in-law apartment or you can build something in your backyard. Tell me about that and how that will increase the housing stock.
So it's these ADUs. So basically, you know, folks who have basement apartments, it's trying to bring basement apartments and houses like that or units like that up to code, basically. A lot of it is already happening now, but it's not legal. So we're trying to make it easier for folks who might want to do that as, you know, for extra income, whatever it may be. There's concern around that. Obviously, a lot of it is because of the hypothetical. And a lot of this, I think, because you want to get that number of possible units built or units enabled, I think there's a lot of fear around the specter of what's possible. It doesn't mean that everyone is actually going to take advantage of what's there.
And also, we're worried about basement apartments in general in flood zone areas.
So flood zone areas will be completely immune from this. So if you're in a flood zone area, you're going to have special protections because we don't want to put anyone in harm's way. Certainly, we saw what happened in Queens a couple of years ago. No one wants that again. So this is about making sure you're doing it smart and you're doing it safe.
But see, we have to talk about the idea of affordability and what's affordable. And a lot of people say that an apartment that costs more than, like, say, $2,000 or $2,500 a month is out of the reach of so many people. Now, I know you changed the income levels about what's affordable, but still, are we going to have enough apartments so that people who need them, who aren't, you know, highly paid, are still going to be able to find a place to live in New York City?
Right. It's a great question. I mean, you know, the zoning changes on their own do nothing for affordability, right? A zoning change does nothing there. Making sure that folks are taking advantage of the new 421A, you know, and making sure that there is money there allocated for affordability is important because we have to build housing at all income levels, not just low income. It's got to be market rate down to low income, all levels. But obviously, people are getting squeezed out of the city, and the priority needs to be creating housing that people can afford. You know, you talk a lot about who's leaving the city. Rich people are not fleeing the city. Working families are fleeing the city because housing is too damn expensive.
But what's the level? I mean, we have about 30 seconds left. What's the level that you would like to see as the median cost of an apartment so that people can build things that people who can't afford can still.
Well, I think the AMI indicator is helpful, so you get an idea of what the area median income is. But my thing is that if the people who build the housing cannot afford to live in it once it's built, then it's too expensive.
So do you have any sense of how many of these 80,000 apartments would qualify for affordability?
I don't have an exact number, but we're trying to make as many of them as possible.
Okay, we're going to have to leave it right there for now, but we'll be right back. Thank you for joining me. It starts with an S and ends with an S. Stress. How are New Yorkers coping with it? They're weighing in on your point. Would you say we're living in stressful times right now?
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Of course it's stressful times.
Not as stressful as those times when I was drafted in 1969. Those are stressful times.
Are you kidding me? Is that a question?
Yeah. It's a question.
Yes.
Why? I just get paid to ask the questions.
Why are we living in stressful times?
Yeah.
The uncertainty.
The economy, wars around the world.
It's expensive now.
People are stressed about
the new regime.
I feel like a lot of people are confused and conflicted about their intentions.
Because of what's happening in politics between the Republicans and the Democrats. They don't listen to each other.
And there's a lot of unknowns.
What stresses you out?
Money, definitely.
Politics, and then regular stuff like school.
Watching the news.
Just the economy.
Worrying about the environment, because I feel like Trump is going to change roll back some of the things.
Climate change, international affairs, feeling like healthcare isn't stable.
I worry about my grandkids.
It stresses me out because people don't seem to care anymore. We don't have, they talk about democracy. Decency is very important.
How do you relax or unwind?
Make music and stuff.
I read, I go to films.
I get together with friends.
I do art, I read.
Try not to think about this and try and not read the news.
Exercise, hang out with friends, family.
Walk. A lot.
Stay away from all these little electronic gadgets.
I read a lot. I walk a lot.
How many steps do you do a day?
About 12 to 14,000.
Good for you. Good for you.
Good job.
So do you think so let me ask you something. So you think you get to do it enough?
Well, I make time for it. I make sure I do. I need it. It's my therapy.
So what do you think needs to happen for people to be able to relax more and unwind more?
Live for the moment.
They have to look at things from a different perspective, I think.
Just have a more open mind when it comes to talking and communicating with people.
I think people have to get out and socialize and listen to each other. I think that's very important.
I think we need to feel like we have more stability in life overall. If those basic needs aren't being met, if we're not feeling like things are stable, it's tough to feel like you can go and relax somewhere.